Hey, soulmates. Hope the weekend was good. I'm fresh off a homecoming high
you
win.
Are. You
yes.
got a homecoming glow.
Well, thank you, darling. Big ups to Mel Tucker and the MSU Spartans Black Coach Power.
That's right. That's right. Come on, Black Coach
That's
Power.
It. We are back for another soulful week right here on Fox Soul's Black Report. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm the Cordelide Corte. And this is your open invitation to go beyond the headlines.
That's right.
Sharing our truth in our voice.
All right, you see a lot of pink within the month of October, but let's not forget it's all about purple. October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
That's right. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, more than 40% of Black women have experienced intimate partner violence.
Now, that also includes intimate partner sexual violence and or intimate partner stalking. So let's chat a little bit about this and its impact on the Black community. So we just mentioned that 40% of Black women have experienced domestic violence in some form. We are now joined by Kandee Lewis, Executive Director of Positive Results Center. Good day, Ms. Lewis. Thank you so much for joining us here on Fox Soul's Black Report.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. Why don't women, Black women, tell that they are in an abusive relationship? I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. Why don't you tell? Why don't you get away? It's more complicated than some may think.
Very much. First off, we don't tell because we are not believed. Far too often, people say things don't happen. We're also victimized. So we'll say things like, you're stupid, you're dumb, why would you stay? So you're already victimizing the victim, and people don't want to hear that. It's also difficult to get the support that they need. Very often we'll get restraining orders, but yet and still that restraining order does not stop that abuser from victimizing the victim.
Yeah.
Those are just a few reasons why they don't stay. In addition to potential.
Sure.
Where are they going to go?
And many times, exactly, and many times children are involved in these, unfortunately, storylines. How important is it to talk and engage children?
It's extremely important. People think that kids, especially little kids, don't know what's going on. First, violence and abuse begins in the womb. If a woman is pregnant and she is being abused, so is that child. And then as that child is being raised in that abusive home, they're learning the behavior. So they will either, in many instances, they will become victims or they will become abusers. And it's not the case in all the cases, but if that woman is being abused, the child is being abused, they're watching the abuse, they're learning the abuse.
Yeah. Ms. Lewis, you have a e-book.
So we have to engage our youth so that we have to engage our youth so they understand that the things that have happened to them is not who they are, but what has happened.
All right, and we're dealing with a little bit of a delay here, so forgive me. Ms. Lewis, you have an e-book entitled What is the Secret, where you give tips to help folks, Black women in particular, navigate through these challenges. Talk about some of the things you discuss in that book.
The e-book is important because women, especially of a certain stature, don't go to domestic violence shelters. They don't go to the resources that are in the community for fear of shame or blame. Then also, it's your victim. How could that possibly be if you're so intelligent, you're polished, and you have this position and stature in the community? And so with the ebook, it gives them all the things that they need. It tells them what violence is, because very often people think that I'm not in an abusive relationship if I'm not hit. But they don't understand that domestic violence looks like you being gaslit or being victimized verbally, emotionally, physically, financially, sexually, and medically. And so it talks about what the signs are, what to do, how to get help, why it's happening, and where to go get the resources so that you can live. And it's important that we understand when a person tells you who they are, like if they say something like, I'm going to kill you, even if they've never hit you, that is their full intent to do so. So make sure that you protect yourself and your family.
Yeah. There is also a national initiative called the Manhood. Can you talk briefly about that? We've got about 2 minutes left.
Yes, we have a program called Promoting Healthy Manhood, where we take our conference around the country and we work with men to help them to understand the trauma that they've experienced, because most men who are abusive have also been abused. And that's not to say that every man is. So this conference works with boys and men, and it's other boys and men who have been victims, who have been abusers, and who have healed and are helping to heal other men so that they can become our advocates to help prevent and end violence. If we're not engaging in the men, we cannot prevent violence.
Agreed. Kandee Lewis, Executive Director of Positive Results Center, we thank you so much for your time this morning and your message and the work you are doing on behalf of women and this issue with domestic violence. And like you, we will continue to wear our purple, not just October, but throughout all the months, as this is an ongoing issue that we must continue to tackle. If you take a look at the bottom of your screen, if you are experiencing domestic violence of any kind, we encourage you to pick up the phone and call. I took a look at their website, and there's about a 15-minute delay because of the high volume, Ms. Lewis, of calls. And so they're asking you to hold on, and they're also routing you to local agencies that might help you as well. Again, we thank you so much, and we appreciate you, and welcome as a soulmate. We will definitely be calling on you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Wow, bravo. Bravo to Miss Kandee Lewis and the incredible work that she's doing. You know, I'm familiar with her work, particularly in Los Angeles, and it is really, really incredible work. And, you know, I think sometimes we forget that, you know, during the pandemic, you know, for folks that were experiencing intimate partner violence, for folks that were experiencing domestic violence, you know, the pandemic made things worse because, you know, you couldn't really get away. You know, you couldn't go to work, you know, or you know, get away from home long enough to be away from your abuser.
And when you talk about children, you know, most times, you know, children leave the home, they go to school, they're sitting in a desk, they're walking up the hallway. Administrators, educators can kind of eye that child if there's some sort of mark or bruising, or they just look disheveled. And when that lockdown came, it kept everybody isolated in the home, away. So you couldn't even really tap in to what may be happening, you know, to a child.
That's right.
That you would normally be able to do when they come to the classroom every day. Yeah.
And I was even reading that with the overturning of Roe v. Wade and with these restrictive, you know, abortion laws going into effect across the country, you know, that's actually having an effect in terms of empowering the abusers. Yes. Right? You know,
to use that as a way to manipulate.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, you know, we need to make sure that we stay aware of the signs, the things to look for, as Ms. Lewis has outlined. And, you know, everybody should have that number saved on their phone, because you never know when you might need it, or somebody you know might need it. And so, you know, the National Domestic Violence Hotline number, you should Google that and save it to your phone. Indeed.
Speaking of abusers, in Missouri, right?
Yeah, I mean, a really terrifying story. In Missouri, a 22-year-old black woman escaped a white man who abducted, tortured, and held her captive for weeks in a basement.
I mean, just a horrific story. According to The Guardian, the woman told police several other black women were killed by her captor less than a month after police dismissed community concerns about a serial killer as completely unfounded. The woman, who has not been named, escaped earlier this month after about a month in captivity, still wearing a metal collar locked with a padlock.
And that's the man.
That's him right there.
Right there. That's the man they think that did it.
Scary, creepy, all of the above. The authorities had to remove that chain and padlock. She told Kansas City police that 39-year-old Timothy Haslett, the guy you just saw there, had imprisoned her in a basement room.
And you know, it's been 40 years since the arrest of Wayne Williams, the man convicted of killing 20 children over a 2-year period.
I clearly remember that. Tonight, our Fox station in Atlanta is airing a special 1-hour report we call A Pattern of Killer. The Trail of Wayne Williams. Dale Russell gives us a preview.
We tracked down key players in the trial: a top prosecutor, Williams' attorney, the head of the Atlanta FBI, and Atlanta's Missing and Murdered Children's Task Force. We also talked to the homicide cop who found the first of the crucial fiber evidence that helped lead to Williams' conviction. And finally, 3 jurors who explained what they saw and why they handed down a guilty verdict. You'll hear jurors' interesting interpretations of the key evidence, like the night Wayne Williams was spotted on the Jackson Parkway Bridge by a stakeout team, just as a loud splash was heard in the river. A body was found downstream 2 days later. Testimony made quite an impression on the jury.
He pulled up on the bridge and I guess opened the back of the station wagon, got the body out, threw it over the bridge, and then the police officer that was down at the bottom heard the splash.
And that time of night, for someone to throw something over in that bridge, and I can say that just was not a well-traveled area, and it still isn't.
I could do this. I could pick him up and throw him over, and I know that Wayne could do it.
I remember that story.
Yikes.
It was huge. It was a scary time in Atlanta. There were questions as to his innocence or his guilt, or was he like this pawn? There were questions even after he was locked up, were there still some activity still happening? It was huge, and it still is huge, obviously, because they go back and revisit what has happened, what has transpired. It's always interesting to see how those families have survived such a tragic incident.
Yeah, I mean, and there have been so many stories in the news, so many movies that have been featured, so many stories that have been told about these serial killers, right? And so if we're not talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, we're talking about this case in Atlanta, we're talking about, the black woman in Missouri held captive. It's important that folks pay attention to the signs, so that we can do our best to avoid this really tragic news coming out of everywhere.
Absolutely.
Too many places.
Yeah.